It was a bright and peaceful morning, the kind that fills a home with warmth and gentle joy. The new baby had just arrived, and laughter echoed softly through the house. But amidst all that happiness, something felt off. The family's loyal dog Max seemed uneasy. For years, he had been the heart of the home, protective, playful, always ready to greet his owners with love. But since the baby came, he had changed completely. His tail no longer wagged. His appetite was gone. He would sit silently in the corner, eyes wide, body trembling whenever the baby cried. At first, everyone thought he was jealous. Maybe he missed being the center of attention. But this wasn't jealousy, this was fear. Whenever the baby was near, Max's entire body went rigid. He wouldn't bark or growl, just stand there frozen, staring at the child as if seeing something invisible. His breathing grew shallow, and a strange tension filled the room. The family tried comforting him, but nothing worked. Nights grew quieter, heavier, as Max began to avoid even entering the baby's room. Then, one night, everything changed. The baby's cry pierced through the silence, louder and sharper than ever before. Max ran toward the nursery, but instead of barking, he stopped right at the door, completely still. His fur bristled, his eyes locked on the crib, his body shaking uncontrollably. The parents rushed in, panicked, calling his name, but he didn't move. He just stood there, staring, as if something inside that room terrified him beyond words. The air turned cold, heavy, and in that silence, they heard it, a faint, slow sound from behind the crib. When the baby first arrived, the whole house felt alive with love and excitement. The gentle sound of lullabies filled every corner, and the soft giggle of a newborn brought warmth to everyone's heart. But amidst that joy, something was wrong. Max, the family's loyal golden retriever, had always been their pride and protector, a gentle soul who loved everyone. Yet suddenly his behavior shifted in a way no one could explain. He began avoiding the nursery, refusing to come near the crib. When the baby cried, Max's ears flattened, his tail tucked between his legs, and he would slowly back away. At first, the family laughed it off, believing it was simple jealousy. They thought Max was just adjusting to no longer being the center of attention. But this was no ordinary jealousy. He stopped eating properly, lost interest in playing, and sometimes sat in front of the baby's door for hours, trembling as if expecting something terrible. His eyes carried a sadness mixed with fear, like he was trying to warn them of something unseen. Nights became eerily quiet. The family could feel the tension in the air whenever Max stared toward the nursery. They didn't know it yet, but their beloved pet was sensing something far beyond their understanding. It was a cold, moonlit night when things took a terrifying turn. The baby's cries echoed through the still house, louder than ever before. The parents woke instantly and rushed toward the nursery, but Max was already there. He stood at the door, completely motionless. His fur was raised, his breathing heavy, and his eyes fixed on the crib with intense fear. When the father called out to him, Max didn't respond. He didn't bark, didn't move, he just stared. Then suddenly the crying stopped. The silence that followed was so deep it made their hearts race. The mother stepped closer, whispering the baby's name, but Max growled softly. Something he had never done before. It wasn't anger. It was pure, shaking terror. Then came a faint noise, a soft creak from behind the crib. Both parents froze. The sound repeated, slow and deliberate, like someone shifting their weight on an old floorboard. Max whimpered, still trembling, refusing to leave his spot. The father slowly turned on the light, and for a brief moment, everything seemed normal. But then the baby started crying again. Only this time, it sounded different. It wasn't just crying. It was as if the baby was scared too. Days passed after that terrifying night, but the family couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the house. Max refused to enter the nursery again, even when his favorite toy was placed inside. Whenever they carried the baby in their arms, he'd circle nervously, whining under his breath. The mother began noticing odd things too, baby toys moving slightly, the mobile spinning on its own, the baby staring into corners with wide, unblinking eyes. The father tried to explain it logically. Maybe it was drafts, maybe the dog was just acting strange because of stress. But deep down, everyone knew something was wrong. One evening, the mother sat in the rocking chair, cradling the baby as Max lay near the door. The lights flickered for a moment, and the baby suddenly turned its head toward the closet, smiling. The mother's heart froze. There was nothing there, but the baby giggled as if watching someone invisible. Max rose instantly, growling low, every hair on his body standing up. The mother whispered his name, terrified. The room felt colder than before, and for the first time she realized Max wasn't afraid of the baby. He was afraid for the baby. The next day, the parents decided to set up a small baby monitor with a camera, just to be sure everything was fine. That night, they tucked the baby in and went to bed, keeping the monitor screen beside them. Around 2 a.m., the familiar cry started again. Max jumped off his bed and ran to the nursery, barking once before freezing in the same spot. The father looked at the screen, but what he saw made his blood run cold. Behind the crib, a faint shadow moved, slowly, deliberately. It was tall, human-like, but distorted. The mother screamed, rushing to the room, only to find nothing there. The baby was crying, Max was shaking, and the air felt freezing cold. They checked every corner, every window, everything was locked tight. Yet, on the baby monitor playback, that same dark shape could be seen leaning toward the crib before vanishing completely. From that night on, Max refused to sleep anywhere else but in front of the nursery door. He would guard it every night, growling softly whenever the air turned still. The family realized their loyal friend had been protecting them from something they couldn't see, something that didn't belong in this world. Terrified and desperate, the family brought in a spiritual expert, a kind old woman who claimed to sense energies. The moment she entered the nursery, her face turned pale. She whispered that something tragic had happened in the house long before they moved in. A mother had lost her child here decades ago, and her sorrow had never left. The entity wasn't trying to harm the baby. It was drawn to it, mistaking it for the one she lost. Max, with his pure heart and loyal spirit, had felt that presence from the start. The woman performed a cleansing ritual, filling the house with the scent of burning sage and prayer. As the ritual ended, Max lay quietly near the baby's crib, for the first time completely calm. The air felt lighter, and the baby slept peacefully through the night. When morning came, sunlight filled the room again, warm and bright. Max wagged his tail softly and placed his paw on the baby's blanket, as if saying, "You're safe now." From that day forward, he was never afraid again. The family never forgot the night their dog faced the unseen and protected the one who couldn't protect themselves. For several days, peace returned to the household. The baby slept soundly, laughter filled the rooms again, and Max seemed like his old self, happy, protective, always nearby. The parents finally began to relax, believing the dark chapter had ended. But sometimes, silence hides warnings we fail to hear. One night, as rain poured heavily outside, the mother awoke to a faint clicking sound through the baby monitor. It wasn't crying, nor movement, just a soft, rhythmic tapping. She turned the volume up slightly. The tapping grew louder, faster, as though someone was gently knocking on wood. Max suddenly lifted his head from his bed downstairs and started barking frantically. His instincts flared again, and before the parents could react, he raced up the stairs. They followed him, hearts pounding, finding him standing once more at the nursery door, body rigid, eyes fixed on the crib. The father switched on the light, but the moment he did, the bulb flickered and went out. The only light now came from flashes of lightning outside the window. In one blinding strike, they saw it, a faint shadow bending over the crib before vanishing in the dark. The mother screamed, clutching the baby, while Max barked wildly, teeth bared at the empty air. The storm outside roared, but what they feared most was inside their own home. After that terrifying night, the family knew something was still attached to the baby's room. Objects began moving on their own, a rattle shaking, a mobile spinning without wind, and faint whispers echoing near the crib. Max never left his guard post by the nursery door. Sometimes he'd growl at the ceiling as though tracking invisible footsteps. The parents grew desperate, unable to explain what was happening. They checked the wiring, the vents, even the attic, but found nothing. The air inside the house had grown heavy again, filled with tension and fear. One afternoon, the mother was alone with the baby, trying to put it to sleep. The baby stared past her shoulder, eyes wide with curiosity. Slowly, its tiny hand reached out toward the air, as if touching someone unseen. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She whispered softly, "It's okay, sweetheart," though she wasn't sure whom she was comforting, the baby or herself. Just then, Max let out a low growl from the hallway. The mobile above the crib began spinning rapidly, and the temperature dropped instantly. The mother grabbed the baby and ran out of the room, calling for help. Something wanted their attention, and this time it wouldn't be ignored. Determined to uncover the truth, the father searched through the old house records and found something chilling. Decades ago, a family had lived there, a mother, father, and infant daughter. The daughter had mysteriously died in her crib, and soon after the mother had vanished without a trace. The case had gone cold, but rumors suggested she never left the house. With this horrifying revelation, the father decided to search the attic, hoping to find answers. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung like curtains from the beams. As he moved a box aside, he found an old photograph tucked under the floorboard. It showed a woman holding a baby, smiling faintly, and behind her the same nursery wallpaper that still lined their walls. Suddenly, a gust of icy air swept through the attic, extinguishing his flashlight for a moment. When it flickered back on, something faint appeared in the distance, a shadow standing still, watching. He froze in terror, whispering Max's name. The dog barked from below, growling, pacing, as though he could sense what was happening. The father ran downstairs, clutching the photo tightly, his face pale as snow. That evening, the family gathered together, terrified but determined to face whatever haunted their home. They decided to spend the night in the living room, away from the nursery. Max lay beside the baby's bassinet, eyes alert, ears twitching at every sound. For hours, all was quiet. But just past midnight, the baby monitor turned on by itself. The static grew louder, then shifted into a faint lullaby, the same tune that played from the baby's mobile upstairs. Everyone froze. The mother held her breath, and Max stood, growling deep in his chest. Then came a whisper. Soft, trembling, unmistakably female. It said one word, "Mine." The lights flickered. The baby began crying uncontrollably, and Max bolted toward the stairs, barking as if to chase something unseen. The father followed, holding the camera they'd set up. When they reached the nursery, the mobile spun violently, though there was no wind. Max barked and barked, his eyes fixed on the empty space beside the crib. And then just as suddenly everything stopped. The air grew still. The baby's cries faded. The room fell silent, eerily, completely silent. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the windows. The house felt lighter, calmer, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted. Max lay peacefully beside the crib, eyes closed but breathing steady. The family looked around cautiously, but for the first time in weeks there was no coldness, no flickering lights, no whispers. The old woman who had helped them before returned to bless the home one final time. She smiled softly and said, "It's over. She's gone." The spirit found peace. Max slowly stood, wagged his tail and nudged the baby's tiny hand. The baby laughed, a sweet, innocent sound that filled the room with warmth. The parents exchanged teary smiles, grateful for their loyal friend who had faced the darkness for them. From that day on, Max was no longer afraid. Every night, he would sleep quietly beside the baby's crib, watching over her with gentle eyes. The house was finally at peace. But the family would never forget the courage of the dog who sensed what they couldn't, the protector who stood between life and the unseen, and the night they learned that love can fight even the darkest fear. True love needs no words, no language, and no explanation. It's felt in the silence of loyalty. Max didn't just protect his family. He sensed their danger long before they ever could. His fear wasn't weakness, it was warning, a sign of devotion so pure it bridged the world between the living and the unseen. This story reminds us that animals often see what human eyes cannot, and their hearts understand what ours refuse to believe. Trust the instincts of those who love you unconditionally, because sometimes their silence speaks louder than any cry for help.